What's good, everyone? This is The Potter Show, and boy do we have a treat for you. Goblin Cursebreaker scanned Harry at age 9 and found 47 illegal Horcrux anchors placed by Dumbledore. Hit subscribe and the bell, let the story begin. Chapter 1, The Account of Harry James Potter. The button was brass, it had a crown stamped on its face, worn almost smooth, and Harry had found it in the skip behind the Tesco on Magnolia Road on Tuesday morning. He'd been looking for something to eat. The button was the only thing worth taking. He stood at the foot of Gringotts steps and looked up. The building was white stone and did not apologize for its size. The steps were wide, each one a little deeper than a normal stair, built for something with a longer stride. The doors at the top were bronze and very tall, and the goblins flanking them held spears with the relaxed grip of people who had been holding spears for a very long time and expected to hold them for considerably longer. Harry had learned over 9 years that the dangerous thing was rarely the obvious thing, so he noted the spears and moved his assessment to the goblins' hands still on the hafts, not wrapped around them, and then to their eyes, which moved in a practiced pattern. Doors, street, stairs, steps, doors. They were watching for something anticipated, not something found. He went up. One of the goblins looked at him directly. Harry looked back, steady without stepping. The goblin's gaze moved on first. Harry filed that and went through the doors. Inside, Gringotts smelled like stone and old iron, and something underneath both that had no name but was not unpleasant. The smell of very large amounts of very settled money, maybe, or just the smell of a building that had been the same temperature for 400 years. The main hall was enormous. The ceiling was so high the chandeliers hung at the height of a second floor in an ordinary building, and they gave off a pale, flat light that cast no shadows worth mentioning and had no warmth in it at all. Harry decided he liked that. Sunlight moved. It told you the time and the weather and how the day was going, and Harry had spent enough years with all three of those things working against him that he found the flat, constant, non-committal light of Gringotts restful in a way he didn't have a word for. The teller's windows ran along both sides of the hall in long rows. Most had queues, families in robes, a man with an owl in a box, two elderly women conducting what appeared to be a very serious argument conducted entirely in whispers. Harry walked the length of the room once, reading the queue lengths, and chose the window with no queue at all. A goblin at the far end, writing in a ledger with ink that was too dark to be ordinary black. Harry stood at the window, the counter came to his chin, he waited. The goblin wrote. "I found a button," Harry said. "I'd like to know if it's worth anything." He set the brass button on the counter. The goblin looked up. His eyes went from Harry's face to the button and back to Harry's face, and then, just briefly, quickly, with the practiced subtlety of someone who'd done it and didn't want to be seen doing it, to Harry's forehead, to the fringe Harry kept forward at all times without ever having consciously decided to do so. Something in the goblin's breathing changed, not much. "Enough. Name," the goblin said. "Harry Potter." He said it the way he always said it to strangers he wasn't sure about. First name and offer, last name, a piece of information delivered after a fractional pause with the option to stop at the first if no one needed more. No one ever stopped at the first. The goblin, the placard on his window read GRIPHOOK in letters Harry had to tilt his head to read, set his pen down. He looked at Harry for 4 full seconds without blinking. Long enough for Harry to observe the ink stain on Gryffindor's left index finger, the small split along the seam of his collar at the shoulder, and the way his stillness was the kind that came just before movement rather than the kind that came from not having decided yet. "One moment," Gryffindor said. He left the window. Harry stood at the counter and watched the hall. The family with the whisper argument had progressed to pointing. The man with the owl had finished his transaction and was having a second, separate argument with someone else about a receipt. The dog, there was, Harry noticed now, a small dog sitting very patiently under the legs of the arguing family, completely unbothered by the pointing, looked like it had been waiting for humans to finish being unreasonable for its entire life and had made a kind of peace with the wait. Gryffindor returned. He had a second goblin with him, older, dressed in a coat of noticeably finer cut, who carried a document already open in one hand as though he'd been reading it on the way here. "Mr. Potter," the older goblin said, "my name is Ragnarok. I am the senior account manager for the Potter estate. Please come with me." It was not phrased as a question. In Harry's experience, people who phrased commands as questions were the ones who wanted you to feel like you had a choice so that when things went wrong, it was your choice's fault. Ragnarok's phrasing was different, a statement of what was going to happen, delivered with the courtesy of advance notice. Harry found this straightforwardly easier. He picked up the brass button from the counter. "You may keep that," Ragnock said, which Harry translated as, "The button is not the issue and we have moved past it." He followed them through a door behind the teller windows, into a corridor that was plain stone and no decoration at all, and then into a room that was small and square with a table, 3 chairs, a lamp of the same pale flat light as the chandeliers, and on the table, a disc of silver metal approximately the diameter of a dinner plate, resting on a square of dark velvet. The disc was covered in markings that Harry could see were not decorative. They had the specific non-random density of text in a language he didn't know. "Please sit," Ragnock said. Harry sat. Ragnock sat across from him. Griffook took a position near the wall to Harry's left with a second ledger already open. "Mr. Potter," Ragnock said, "you have an account at Gringotts. It was opened at your birth under a standing provision for children of registered account holders, and it has been accruing interest under estate management for the past 9 years. "You were unaware of this?" "Yes," Harry said. "You were also unaware that Gringotts conducts a mandatory identity verification for any registered account holder who presents themselves at a teller window. The verification is triggered automatically on name and physiological signature, both matched." Harry thought about this for a moment. "What's a physiological signature?" "Your magical output. Every magical individual produces a distinct resonance. Ours is calibrated to register Potter family signatures. Yours is quite clear." He set the open document on the table in front of him and aligned it parallel to the table's edge. The verification match triggered a further protocol. For minor account holders who arrive without a documented guardian, we conduct a heritage scan. This is standard procedure. It ensures we understand who we are speaking with and what our obligations to them are. He nodded toward the disc. "The scan is performed using this instrument. It will document your magical lineage, your current physical condition, and any active enchantments on your person. The process takes approximately 4 minutes. You will feel some sensation, a pressure, most commonly, but nothing that causes harm." Harry looked at the disc, then at Ragnock, then at Griffook, who was holding his pen over the ledger in a way that meant he was ready to write before anything had been said. "All right," Harry said, "place your right hand on the disc, palm down." Harry put his right hand on the disc. The metal was cold in the way of stone that has never been near a window, a deep settled cold. Then it warmed under his palm, quickly, more quickly than it should have from body heat alone. Then a hum started, not a sound exactly, more a vibration at a frequency that Harry felt first in his back teeth, then in the bones of his forearm, then somewhere behind his eyes. The markings on the disc's surface began to illuminate, section by section, from the center outward. The light they produced was not the pale, flat light of the chandeliers. It was a warm amber, and it moved, and it picked out the markings in sequence with the methodical pace of something reading. Ragnock watched the disc. Griffook's pen began to move. Harry watched Ragnock because Ragnock was more interesting than the disc. The disc was doing something to Harry, which meant Harry already knew what it was doing. Ragnock's face would tell him what the disc was finding. For the first 90 seconds, Ragnock's face told him nothing in particular. The pen moved. Amber light crept outward across the disc's surface. The hum deepened fractionally and moved from Harry's teeth into the tissue behind his ears. Then, at approximately the 2-minute mark, something changed in Ragnock's expression. Not large, nothing lurched or widened. It was the same change Harry had seen in teachers reviewing test results, in Aunt Petunia reading letters from the school, in the school nurse the day Harry had come in after the incident on the stairs, and she'd looked at his arm for a long time before looking at him. A change from reading to processing, from motion to stillness before a different kind of motion. Ragnock said something in gobbledygook, 2 syllables, crisp. Griffook answered, 4 syllables. Ragnock said something longer. 8 or 10 syllables with a cadence that was not a question. Griffook wrote it down without looking up. They continued like this. Harry kept his hand on the disc. The hum had moved behind his eyes now, pressing evenly from somewhere inside his skull, not painful, not alarming, just present and steady like the building's own pulse. He counted Ragnock's exchanges with Griffook. 9, 10, 11. The amber light had covered the whole disc and was cycling back through sections, returning to specific marked areas with a persistence that suggested they needed more information than the first pass had produced. At the 4-minute mark, Ragnock said something short and sharp, and the disc's light dimmed. Not out, dimmed to a low, steady glow at the center. "Mr. Potter," Ragnock said. "Remove your hand, please." Harry removed his hand. He put it in his lap. The hum faded from his skull over the next 30 seconds, draining backward the way it had come, out through his teeth and gone. Ragnock placed both hands flat on the table. He sat like that for a moment. In Harry's experience, this particular quality of stillness, hands visible, weight settled, no document being consulted, belonged to someone deciding how to begin something they would only get one chance to begin correctly. Mr. Potter, Ragnarok said, I am going to describe what this scan has found. I will be precise and complete. I ask that you hold your questions until I've finished, because the information is cumulative and the early portions will not make full sense without the later portions. All right, Harry said, the scan confirmed your lineage as Potter, paternal line, and Evans, maternal line. It confirmed your age as 9 years and your status as a magical minor. It also documented your current physical condition. He did not look away from Harry's face. The condition shows the expected indicators for mild to moderate malnutrition, chronic sleep insufficiency, and a healed fracture of the right ulna, the smaller of the two forearm bones. The fracture healed approximately 18 months ago. It healed without treatment and without proper alignment, which means it healed incorrectly. The bone has compensated over time, but there is residual structural irregularity. Harry said nothing. The scan also documents all active magical enchantments on your person. This portion of the scan is the reason I needed to speak with you directly rather than simply completing the account verification and sending you on your way. Ragnarok picked up the document he'd brought with him and turned to a specific page. Standard enchantment scans on magical minors produce typically between 0 and 3 results, monitoring charms placed by parents, protective glamours. Occasionally a familial binding or school preparatory construct. 0 to 3 is the normal range. Any result over 10 triggers an automatic escalation to senior account management. That is why I am here and not Gryffindor. How many? Harry said. He had heard a number forming in the shape of the conversation and wanted it confirmed. 47, Ragnarok said. Harry sat with this. They are not monitoring charms, Ragnarok continued, his voice unchanged. They are not protective glamours or family bindings. Each of the 47 identified constructs is a soul fragment anchor. I will explain what that means in precise terms because it is possible you have not encountered the concept. He set the document down with careful hands. A soul fragment anchor is a magical construct used to bind a portion of a living soul to a physical vessel. The purpose is to prevent the destruction of that soul portion even when the soul's primary host, the person it belongs to, is killed. If the host dies, the anchored fragment continues to exist inside the vessel, preserved, waiting. The process of creating this construct is called Horcrux creation. It requires the deliberate splitting of a soul, which requires the commission of an act that I will not describe in further detail at this time. He paused. Horcrux creation is illegal, he said, under British wizarding law, under Goblin law, under the International Statute of Magical Practices. Under 3 separate interspecies treaties that predate the British Ministry of Magic by 4 centuries, there are no jurisdictions in which it is not illegal. There are no exceptions. The room was very quiet. Someone, said Ragnarok, has placed 47 Horcrux anchors inside your nervous system. Harry looked at the disc on the table. The amber glow at its center pulsed once, slowly, like something breathing. Inside, Harry said. Yes, not on me, not attached, inside. Correct. Ragnarok lifted a second sheet that Gryffindor had placed at the table's edge at some point without Harry noticing. The distribution is as follows: 11 anchors in the spinal cord at 7 distinct vertebral levels. 9 in the optic nerve tissue distributed across both eyes. 7 anchored to the tissue surrounding the scar on your forehead. This cluster is the densest and the oldest. 4 in the auditory nerve bilateral. 6 in the peripheral nervous system of the extremities with concentration in the fingertips. 10 distributed across the cortical surface of the brain with a particular concentration in the left temporal lobe. He set the sheet down. They are structurally very well placed. The distribution is not random. It reflects specific anatomical knowledge and a clear intention about which neural systems to involve. Harry looked at his right hand, which had been on the disc. The hand looked the same as it always had. Are they doing something? He said. Right now. Currently they are stable, Ragnarok said. They exist. They exert a low-level resonance on the surrounding tissue. At their present state, your body is compensating adequately. He paused for a beat, the kind of pause that precedes the sentence that matters. That will change. The 47 anchors interact with each other through your nervous system. The resonance of each anchor compounds with the others. At 9 years old, your system is managing the interference. By 11 or 12, it will begin to outpace your body's capacity to self-regulate. What happens then? The interference pattern begins to affect neural function. Cognitive change is first subtle, then progressive. Physical deterioration follows in the nervous system and then more broadly. The timeline from threshold to complete neurological failure based on the current density and distribution of the anchors is approximately 3 to 4 years. Harry absorbed this the way he absorbed most large information, found the edges of it first, mapped the perimeter, left the center for later. Who put them there, he said. Ragnarok folded his hands. The scan identifies the magical signature of the construct's creator. A magical signature is as individual as a fingerprint. All 47 anchors carry the same signature. It belongs to a single individual whose signature is on file in our records, a pause of exactly the right length. His name is Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. Harry had heard the name twice in his life. Once from his uncle, delivered in a tone that Harry had classified as performance, Vernon Dursley performing contempt he wanted an audience for. Once from his aunt in a different tone entirely, one Harry had noted and not been able to categorize at the time. He could categorize it now. It had been the tone of someone naming a force they had decided was beyond their ability to affect. I don't know him, Harry said. No, said Ragnarok, but he knows you. He has known you since your birth. His signature on these anchors dates to within 6 hours of your parents' deaths. Harry said nothing. We believe the initial construction occurred at Godric's Hollow, between the time of your parents' deaths and the time you were removed from the site. The scan indicates at least 2 subsequent visits. The anchor structures show evidence of adjustment, refinement. Work done after the initial placement to correct or optimize the constructs. When, Harry said, the deterioration patterns of the anchor structures suggest one visit when you were approximately 2 years old and one when you were approximately 5. Harry looked at the table's surface. Bare stone, nothing on it except the disc and Ragnarok's documents and the second sheet with the distribution numbers. He came back, Harry said, yes, to check they were working, to check and to adjust. The constructs in the temporal lobe show evidence of 2 distinct construction phases, which suggests that the initial placement in that region was not functioning as intended, and a second visit corrected it. Harry put the brass button on the table and looked at it, the crown worn smooth. He'd thought it might be worth something. It wasn't the button he was thinking about. What does he need them for? Harry said. Ragnarok glanced at Griffook brief and then back. That question is part of the ongoing assessment. What I can tell you is what the constructs are doing structurally, which is preserving soul-fragment. Whose soul-fragment and to what end we are continuing to evaluate. Harry nodded. He recognized Goblin discretion by now. It had a different texture from evasion. Evasion moved sideways. This was a straight line that stopped at a specific point. All right, he said, what happens next? Griffook left and returned with a tray that held a meat pasty on a plate, a glass of water, and a stack of documents. He set the tray on the table without comment or explanation. Harry ate the pasty because there was no reason not to, and it was better than most things he had eaten in recent memory. Ragnarok spent the next 14 minutes writing without speaking. His pen moved at a consistent pace, never stopping to reconsider, which meant he was not composing but rather transcribing something he had already composed. Harry ate and watched the lamp and listened to the pen. Mr. Potter, Ragnarok said eventually, not looking up, I want to explain the institutional framework that governs what happens now. I am explaining it because what Gringotts is about to do will appear, to people who are not familiar with our law, to be either excessive or politically reckless. I want you to understand that it is neither. All right, Harry said. Gringotts is not only a bank, Ragnarok said. It is the financial arm of the Goblin Nation, which is a sovereign entity. The Goblin Nation operates under a treaty with the British Ministry of Magic ratified in 1702. Under that treaty, Gringotts functions under Goblin law within its walls and in all matters pertaining to its account holders. British law does not supersede Goblin law in these areas. The Ministry cannot override our decisions. The Wisengamot cannot review our actions. The treaty was negotiated after a war, and goblins, as a rule, negotiate better than wizards do. He turned a page. You became, the moment you walked through our doors and triggered the account verification, a subject of our jurisdiction in this matter. You're saying that when you do things on my behalf, Harry said, no one can tell you to stop. Ragnarok paused his writing. It was the pause of someone who had just been given a precise summary they had not expected. That is substantially correct, he said and resumed writing. What does Goblin law say about what was done to me? Under the Goblin Sovereignty Act and the related financial statutes, an account holder is a protected asset. Not only the gold in their vault, their person, their body, their magical capability, their future earning and transactional capacity. All of it falls within the definition of protected assets the moment the account is opened. He turned another page. A magical construct placed inside the body of a registered minor account holder without documented parental or guardian consent constitutes unlicensed modification of a protected asset. This is a criminal offense under Goblin law. One unauthorized construct, Harry said. What does that carry? Fines. Mandatory removal at the offender's expense, possible account suspension, and 47. Ragnarok set his pen down with a small, precise sound. 47 unauthorized constructs placed over a period of 9 years in 3 separate installation events in a configuration that demonstrates deliberate surgical precision. This falls under Clause 14 of the Sovereignty Act. Criminal interference with a protected account holder. The distinction is significant. What does Clause 14 carry? Ragnarok looked at him with an expression that was not satisfaction exactly, but was adjacent to the state that precedes satisfaction. An immediate lien on the interfering party's entire registered financial portfolio. All accounts, all assets, all registered magical constructs and intellectual properties. The lien is placed without prior notice and without the possibility of ministerial or judicial review under any non-Goblin jurisdiction. It is held pending full remediation of the damage to the account holder, at which point the final disposition of the seized assets is calculated based on the extent of the original offense, the cost of remediation, and what our law calls the premium of violation. He paused. The premium of violation is, in simple terms, a penalty multiplied by the degree of premeditation the offense demonstrates. And this offense demonstrates, Harry said. 3 separate visits, Ragnarok said. Adjustment of constructs that were not functioning as intended. A distribution pattern that reflects advanced anatomical knowledge, 9 years of sustained interference. He picked up his pen. The premeditation premium under Clause 14 is not capped. Harry turned this over. You're going to take everything he has. We are going to take everything he has registered with us, Ragnarok said precisely, and calculate the total reclamation from there. What does his portfolio look like? Ragnarok was quiet for 3 seconds. He has maintained accounts with us since 1893. He is 115 years old. The portfolio is extensive. Another pause. The initial assessment suggests this may be the largest single reclamation action in Gringotts' institutional history. Harry said he thought you wouldn't do it. He calculated the political cost of pursuing the headmaster of Hogwarts, the supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, and the chief warlock of the Wizengamot as prohibitive. He has spent his career ensuring that the political cost of crossing him is prohibitive for most institutions. Ragnarok's pen moved again steadily. He miscalculated in this instance what we consider prohibitive. What do you consider prohibitive? Harry said. Ragnarok did not look up. Very little. We are a bank, Mr. Potter. We have been operating continuously since 1374. We have survived 13 Goblin rebellions, 2 world wars, 6 ministerial attempts to nationalize our operations, and 1 rather unpleasant incident in the 14th century involving a Swedish dragon and 300 pounds of silver. Albus Dumbledore is a significant political figure with a long reach. He turned a page. He is not unprecedented. A 4th Goblin arrived, conferred with Ragnarok in Gobbledegook for 90 seconds, and left with 3 sealed documents. Griffook opened the box of files that had appeared on the table at some point. Harry was not entirely sure when, and began transferring documents to Ragnarok in a sequence that was clearly pre-established, each one arriving 2 or 3 seconds before Ragnarok reached for it. Harry counted the documents as they moved from box to table. He got to 23 before Ragnarok set his pen down and spread his hands flat. The Potter estate, Ragnarok said, has a long legal history with Gringotts. The relevant portion for our current purposes concerns the matter of your guardianship. He selected one of the 23 documents from the stack. Your father's will, executed at Gringotts in the autumn of 1981, names Sirius Orion Black as your primary guardian in the event of both your parents' deaths. Sirius Black was a registered Gringotts account holder in good standing. The will is a legal document filed with us, executed correctly and binding. Harry had never heard the name Sirius Black in his life. You were not placed with Sirius Black, Ragnoc continued. You were placed with your maternal aunt and her husband, who are non-magical, who are not account holders, and who are not named anywhere in your parents' legal documents in any capacity. The decision to place you with the Dursleys was made by Albus Dumbledore and implemented through informal pressure on ministry officials rather than through any legal process. It bypassed your father's will entirely. It bypassed Gringotts. He set the document down. Under the 1702 treaty, estate decisions affecting a registered minor account holder require Gringotts' cosignature. You were not consulted. He moved me without your knowledge, Harry said. He moved you without our knowledge, without legal authority, contrary to your father's documented wishes, and into a household that has subsequently been drawing on your estate account for a period of 7 years without documented authorization for any of those withdrawals. Ragnoc picked up a second document. Your account has been funding the Dursley household's food, utilities, and incidental expenses to the total of, he read a figure Harry did not have a frame of reference for, but which had several digits, since you arrived at their home. Harry sat with this for a moment. They didn't know I had money, he said, or they knew but they never told me. The account access logs indicate that a withdrawal authorization was submitted in November 1981, signed with what purports to be your mother's signature, but which our analysts have flagged as inconsistent with Lily Potter's documented signing history. That authorization has funded the subsequent withdrawals. Someone forged my mother's signature, Harry said, after she was dead. That is what the analysis indicates, Ragnoc said. Harry put the brass button back in his pocket. He'd stopped turning it over at some point. This is all one thing, he said. The guardianship, the money, the anchors, it's all connected. Yes, said Ragnoc. He needed me somewhere specific, somewhere he controlled, with people who wouldn't ask questions or involve lawyers. The Dursley family is not equipped to seek redress through either ministry channels or Gringotts, Ragnoc said. They are not connected to the magical world. They are also, by all indicators, sufficiently occupied with their own concerns to be disinclined toward detailed inquiry into your account status. And he needed the anchors stable, Harry said. That's why he came back, not just to check they worked. To make sure the environment wasn't disrupting them. Ragnoc looked at him for a long moment. That is a reasonable structural inference from the evidence we have, he said. You understand this quickly. I've been thinking about it, Harry said, which was true. He'd been thinking about it since Ragnoc had said the number 47. He thought about things by building the shape of them from the outside in, and the shape of this was becoming clear. Dumbledore had placed pieces of something inside him, had then placed him in a house where no one would look too closely at what he was. Had arranged for him to be financially dependent on a household that didn't know they were keeping him for someone else. Had come back twice in the night presumably, while Harry slept in a cupboard to check the work. Had planned to do this until Harry reached the threshold age where the anchors would have ended him. Had presumably a plan for what happened at that point. The shape of it was very clear. Harry filed it and sat straight in his chair. What do you need from me? He said. Testimony, Ragnoc said. Account access confirmation. Agreement to temporary ward status under Goblin Sovereignty Clause 7, which places you under Gringotts protection pending full remediation of your account. Ward status means you remain within Gringotts or under direct Goblin escort until the anchors are extracted and your physical condition is restored to an unmodified baseline. I agree to ward status, Harry said. Ragnoc looked at him. You may take time to consider. I've considered. There was nothing to consider. The alternative was Privet Drive, the cupboard, the routine of managed invisibility, and the information that by 12 he would start declining. I agree. Griffook wrote in his ledger. The scratch of the pen was the sound of something official. The ward status also triggers a formal protection order, Ragnoc said, returning to his papers. No individual may remove you from Gringotts' care without documented authorization from a designated guardian reviewed and approved by a Goblin senior account manager. Albus Dumbledore is not and has never been your documented guardian. He has no authority to make decisions regarding your person or your estate under our law. What if he tries anyway, Harry said. Then he compounds the offense, Ragnoc said simply. Ragnoc wrote 3 more letters after that. He wrote them fast with the movement of someone who had already decided every word before he picked up the pen, which was efficient and meant there was nothing to watch except his hand moving and the growing density of ink on paper. Harry watched him write anyway. The letters were sealed with a stamp, not wax, something darker, pressed deep, the stamp of the institution's formal authority rather than ordinary correspondence. When the fourth goblin came for them, he took them the way you take things that are already in motion, already committed, already past the point where the motion can be stopped. One to Albus Dumbledore at Hogwarts, Ragnarok said, not to Harry, not quite to Gryffindor, more to the room. One to the Ministry of Magic, Department of Magical Law Enforcement, filed for record. One to the International Goblin Conclave Secretariat, flagged as preliminary notice of a major jurisdiction action. He capped his pen. He will receive the summons this evening. He will not come tomorrow. He will attempt to manage this through the ministry first, then the Wisengamot, then possibly the press. None of those avenues will produce results. He will come himself in approximately 48 hours. And when he comes, Harry said. When he comes, Ragnarok said, we will have had 48 hours to complete our documentation. He looked at the stack of 23 papers, and something in his expression was the expression of a craftsman looking at a completed instrument. 48 hours is sufficient. The room Gryffindor showed him was on the third level below the main hall, accessed by a corridor that sloped downward at a gradual angle through solid stone. Not carved, the stone here was not carved or ornamented, just the original material of the earth, cut smooth and left as itself. Torches in brackets gave light without warmth. The floor was dry, the ceiling was low enough that Gryffindor almost but not quite had to duck. The room was small, stone walls, a narrow bed with wool blankets the color of the stone. A desk and a chair, a lamp in the wall above the desk, a basin with water, cold from the pipe but clean. It was exactly what it was, nothing extra, nothing trying to be anything else. Harry stood in the doorway and looked at it. Meals are brought 3 times a day, Gryffindor said. He was still in the corridor. Harry had noticed in the 30 seconds since Gryffindor had opened the door that Gryffindor had not left. There is a bathing room 2 doors to the right. The ward rooms on this level are not occupied currently. You will have the corridor to yourself. Harry went in and sat on the bed. The mattress was thin but even, and the blankets were clean. He put his hand on the wool, and it was wool, just wool, no smell of anything that had been there before. The extraction, he said. How long does it take? Gryffindor leaned against the doorframe, not quite entering the room. 3 days of preparation. The extraction itself, per anchor, requires approximately 40 minutes under controlled conditions, with recovery intervals between procedures. For 47 anchors, the full process, with proper rest periods and monitoring, runs 26 days. Harry looked at the ceiling, stone, just stone, and each extraction is it. He stopped. He didn't know what he was asking exactly. The anchors are in your nervous system, Gryffindor said. He said it the way Ragnarok had said everything, plainly, as information. The extraction process works from the peripheral nervous system inward. The procedures are conducted under careful magical sedation. You will not be conscious for the removals themselves, but afterward, there is discomfort. It diminishes over the first day, the tissue repairs well, your baseline health is adequate, and we will supplement as needed. He paused. The procedures themselves do not hurt, Harry nodded. Gryffindor, he said, yes, the scan when Ragnarok read the results. The ones in the spinal cord, the ones in the optic nerves. He looked at his hands. Did the scan say if they'd done anything already, if there was any, if they'd already damaged anything? Gryffindor was quiet for long enough that Harry looked up. The constructs in the optic tissue, Gryffindor said, are associated with the vision impairment you currently experience. The degree of blur at distance is consistent with the construct's compression of the relevant nerve tissue. Harry sat with this. He'd had glasses since he was 6, found a pair in the lost property bin at school, scratched, too large and still better than nothing. He wore them when he was outside the house. Inside the house they had a way of getting broken, so he kept them in his shoe. My eyesight, he said, once the constructs in the optic tissue are extracted, the nerve tissue will likely recover a substantial portion of its natural function. We cannot make guarantees, but the current damage appears to be compressive rather than degenerative. Harry put the brass button on the desk, crown face up. Thank you, he said. It came out with a flatness that was not indifference. It came out the way things came out when the feeling attached to them was larger than the language available, and Harry had learned not to reach for larger language because it was usually wrong and sometimes dangerous and always something people could use against you afterward. Gryffindor looked at him for a moment. We have standing procedures for minor account holders in protective ward status. You are not the first, he paused. You are the most comprehensively damaged. I know, Harry said. Get some rest. Breakfast is brought at 7. he left. The door stayed open, which Harry appreciated. Closed doors in small rooms had a specific texture that he had learned not to invite. He lay down on the bed with his boots still on and looked at the stone ceiling and counted the irregularities in the surface until they were no longer interesting, which took a long time because there were many of them and he was thorough. Down the corridor, up 3 flights, across the main hall that had gone quiet with the evening, Ragnar sat at his desk with the case file open and the lamp burning steadily. The file was 23 pages now. By morning, it would be considerably longer. He reviewed each page with the same pace, the same expression, not satisfaction, not outrage, just the focused state of a professional documenting damage for which someone was going to pay in full. At the bottom of the 23rd page, in the column reserved for case classification, he wrote 2 words in gobbledygook that translated roughly as maximum reclamation. He underlined them once. He did not underline things twice. The iron stamp sat on his desk to the right of the file. It had been used 3 times tonight. He would use it more before this was finished. He turned to page 24 and began. Chapter 2, Regulatory Action. The first thing Harry noticed about Gringotts mornings was the light. Did not change. The torches in the corridor burned at the same pale, flat consistency they had managed all night. He'd seen them through the open door each time he woke, and the lamp in the wall above the desk held its same low, steady glow, and somewhere distant in the stone above him, the chandeliers in the main hall were presumably doing what chandeliers did, which was exactly what they'd been doing the day before. There was no window, no announcement, no difference between the quality of the air at 6 and the quality of the air at 8. The morning arrived only because Griffook appeared in the doorway at 7 with a plate, porridge, an egg, a piece of bread, a glass of water with something faintly mineral in its taste. Harry ate all of it. He ate with the concentration of someone who had not always been able to count on the next meal being when it was supposed to be, which was a habit he did not examine and did not intend to. Griffook sat in the chair by the desk with a document and read. He did not make conversation. Harry did not make conversation. When Harry finished eating, Griffook took the plate and replaced it with a second document, a formal printed form, dense with text, titled in English at the top. Gringotts Sovereign Ward Status Confirmation, Minor Account Holder. Sign at the 3 marked points, Griffook said. Date it with today's date in the Goblin calendar format, which is at the top of the page. Harry read the form, all of it, every clause, which took 11 minutes. Griffook did not indicate impatience. He read his own document and waited. The form said in legal language that was dense but not impenetrable. You are under our protection. We have specific obligations to you. You have specific rights within our jurisdiction, and no external party has authority over your person or your account without our institutional consent. It said this in several hundred words across 3 sections, with subpoints, but that was the shape of it. Harry signed all 3 points and dated it. Griffook took the form, checked each signature against what Harry assumed was a reference from the account file, and nodded once. He left. He came back 8 minutes later with a copy of the form stamped with the iron mark. Yours, Griffook said, and gave it to Harry. Harry folded it and put it in his inside pocket next to the brass button. He had a pocket specifically for things that needed keeping. It was deeper than the others, and he'd reinforced the seam himself with thread from a spool he'd found in the bin at school. Ragnar wants you at 9, Griffook said. He'll explain the preparation schedule for the extraction procedures. And the Dumbledore response. Has there been one? Harry said. There has been 3. The meeting room was the same small square room with the table and the lamp. Silver Disc was gone. In its place, arranged with Ragnar's characteristic precision, were 4 stacks of documents of different heights, a second lamp that had been brought in to supplement the first, and a tea service that appeared to have been left by someone who had not been asked to bring it but had decided to anyway, because the tray was slightly off-center in a way that suggested it had been set down quickly, by someone who wasn't sure it was welcome. Ragnar was already there. He did not look like someone who had slept. Mr. Potter, he said. Sit. Harry sat. The summons was received at Hogwarts at 11:47 last evening, Ragnar said. He was reading from the top document on the first stack, but his eyes moved at the pace of someone reciting rather than parsing. The delivery was confirmed by our courier at 11:49. At 12:31 this morning, the first response arrived. It was from the Office of the Minister for Magic, Cornelius Fudge, and stated that Gringotts' summons of a senior ministry-affiliated official was irregular, and requested that we suspend all actions until a ministerial review could be conducted. Harry poured himself water from a jug on the tray. What did you say? We responded that the ministerial review process does not apply to actions taken under the Goblin Sovereignty Act, and attached a copy of the relevant treaty provisions with the applicable clauses underlined. and a formal note reminding the minister's office that this treaty was signed by a minister for magic in 1702 and has never been amended. He turned to the next document. At 2:14, a response arrived from the Wisengamot Administrative Office, indicating that the chief warlock, Albus Dumbledore himself, had filed a procedural objection asserting that the summons constituted a violation of the separation of institutional jurisdictions. He filed his own objection, Harry said. He did. It was well constructed. It cited 4 precedents, 3 of which were genuinely applicable and 1 of which was not, which suggests it was written in haste because Albus Dumbledore is not a man who cites inapplicable precedents by accident. Ragnarok set the document down. We responded by filing the formal lien. Harry looked up. The ministerial objection and the Wisengamot objection were both, legally, attempts to slow our process. The appropriate response to an attempt to slow a process when the process is legally unimpeachable is to accelerate it. Ragnarok's hands were flat on the table. As of 4:47 this morning, a lien has been placed on Albus Dumbledore's entire registered portfolio at Gringotts, all accounts frozen. All registered asset classes under Goblin hold, all access suspended pending resolution of the case. Harry considered this. He'll know now that you're not slowing down. He knew that when we didn't respond to the first letter by suspending our actions. The lien merely confirms the knowing formally. What was the third response? Ragnarok's expression did something careful. At 6:52 this morning, a personal letter arrived, not from Dumbledore's institutional address, from his private one, which is not commonly known and which he used, presumably, to signal that this was not an official communication but a personal one. He picked up the third document, which was shorter than the others and was not printed but handwritten. I will read it. He read it. Dear Director Ragnarok, I find myself in the unusual position of writing to you outside the channels of formal institutional correspondence, and I hope you will receive this in the spirit in which it is intended, as one thoughtful individual to another, unencumbered by the weight of institutional formality. I am aware that the scan of young Harry's account has returned results that, removed from context, appear alarming. I understand the obligations your institution operates under, and I respect them profoundly. What I must ask you to consider, however, is that context is everything in matters of this kind. The constructs you have identified were placed under circumstances of extraordinary emergency, during the darkest period our world has known, with the sole purpose of protecting a child and ensuring the eventual safety of every magical being in Britain. I do not ask that you disregard your procedures. I ask only that you grant me the opportunity to explain, in full, the necessity that produced these actions before any irreversible steps are taken. I trust in the wisdom of the Goblin nation. I trust in your own considerable wisdom, Director. I believe when you have heard the full account, you will understand that what appears to be a violation is, in fact, an act of profound love for this boy and for our world. With deepest respect and the warmest regards, Albus Dumbledore. The room was quiet. Profound love, Harry said. Yes, said Ragnarok. Harry looked at the tea service. He had not touched the tea. What do you think he thinks that letter will do? He thinks it will do several things, Ragnarok said, setting the handwritten page down with the same precision he set everything down, which gave it no more and no less significance than any other document in the room. He thinks it will establish a conciliatory tone before he arrives in person, so that the meeting begins on ground he has partially shaped. He thinks the phrase profound love may create in me an awareness that there is a child involved in this proceeding whose interests I might, if I am not careful, lose sight of in the pursuit of institutional process. He looked at Harry directly. He thinks the phrase considerable wisdom will flatter me into a more yielding position. Does it? Harry said. Mr. Potter, Ragnarok said, I have been a senior account manager at Gringotts for 61 years. In that time, I have been called wise by 3 ministers for magic, 2 ambassadors from foreign magical governments, and a Norwegian sea witch who tried to leverage the compliment into a favorable exchange rate on cursed gold. He picked up his pen. None of them received the favorable exchange rate, Harry said. When is he coming? His response to the formal summons, separate from the personal letter, accepted the meeting. He will arrive this afternoon. He specified 2 o'clock. Ragnarok looked at the clock on the wall, which Harry had not noticed before. It was 11:40. He specified 2 o'clock because he wants the morning to work with. He will spend the morning in London at the ministry and at the Wisengamot, building what political support he can in the time available to him. He will arrive precisely on time because arriving precisely on time, for a man who could arrive whenever he chose, is a statement about the nature of his compliance. You know him, Harry said. I know the type, Ragnarok said. He is not unique. He is the most capable example of the type that I have personally encountered, but the type itself is well documented in our institutional records. What type? The type that has never in a long and successful life encountered a problem that could not be resolved through an application of sufficient charm, sufficient moral authority, or sufficient political leverage. These individuals arrive at Gringotts with a natural expectation that the same tools will function here. He uncapped his pen. They are always surprised to find that they do not. At 1:58, Griffook came to the wardroom to collect Harry. Harry had spent the intervening hours reviewing the extraction preparation schedule Ragnarok had provided 26 days precise. The procedures listed in the order they would occur with the rationale for the sequence documented alongside each stage. And then when he read it twice, he sat on the bed and thought about the shape of the afternoon the way he thought about any situation where something consequential was going to happen in a room he'd be in. He put his boots on and followed Griffook up. The meeting room had been reconfigured. The table was larger, or a different, larger table had replaced it. There were more chairs. The 4 stacks of documents were still there, but they had been joined by 6 additional stacks, and all of them had been positioned with a specific intention to their arrangement. Ragnarok was at the head of the table, with Griffook to his right and a goblin Harry had not met before, older than Griffook, wearing a formal chain across his coat, to his left. 2 more goblins sat further down the table, one with a large ledger and one with a recording instrument, a sphere of dark crystal on a stand that rotated very slowly. That's for the official record, Griffook said, following Harry's gaze to the crystal. Everything said in this room is transcribed by it. Simultaneously, he said it the way he said most things, the information delivered because it was relevant, nothing extra attached. Harry sat in the chair indicated to Ragnarok's right with Griffook between them. He folded his hands on the table. At 2 o'clock precisely, the door opened. Albus Dumbledore was tall. Harry had not expected him to be tall. He had constructed an image from the name and the 2 times he'd heard it, an image of someone large in the political sense but otherwise perhaps small, compressed by age. Dumbledore was not compressed by age. He was thin, and he had the white hair and the long white beard and the half-moon spectacles that made him look like someone from a painting. But he moved through the door with the ease of a man who entered rooms and allowed them to configure themselves around him, which was different from the ease of a man who moved through rooms confidently. He wore robes of deep blue. He carried a wand in his right hand, loosely, the way a person carries something they have carried for so long it has become part of their silhouette. His eyes behind the half-moon glasses were very blue and very attentive, and when they found Harry across the room, they registered something, processed, and then very deliberately softened. "Harry," he said. His voice was exactly what the letter had sounded like, warm, low, the particular frequency of a voice that had spent decades being the most reasonable voice in any room. "I am so glad you are safe. When I heard what had happened, that you'd gone into London, you must have had such a frightening day." Harry looked at him. He did not move his hands. "My name is Albus Dumbledore," Dumbledore continued, crossing toward the table, toward Harry specifically, as though the goblins were furniture the room had come with. "I've been keeping a close watch over you, my boy, though I'm afraid I haven't been as present as I should have been. That is something I intend to remedy. Please sit down," Ragnarok said. Dumbledore turned to Ragnarok with the expression of a man who has just been reminded of something he had not forgotten, merely deprioritized. He sat on the opposite side of the table from Harry, across and 1 seat down from Ragnarok, and settled his wand across his knee and folded his hands with the precision of someone performing openness. "Director Ragnarok," he said, "thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I know the circumstances have been unusual." "This is a formal proceeding under the Goblin Sovereignty Act," Ragnarok said. "The crystal to your left is an official recorder. Everything you say in this room is entered into the case record. Do you acknowledge that?" A very brief pause. "I do, thank you." Ragnarok opened the first document stack. "I will describe the current state of the case. You will then have the opportunity to respond." Dumbledore settled back slightly in his chair, the way a man settles when he has decided to let something run its course before he moves. "Of course." "At approximately 3 in the afternoon yesterday," Ragnarok said, "Harry James Potter presented himself at a Gringotts teller window. A mandatory account holder identity verification was triggered. A heritage scan was conducted under standard minor account holder protocol. The scan identified 47 soul-fragment anchors, commonly termed Horcrux constructs, embedded in Mr. Potter's nervous system. All 47 anchors carry a single, consistent magical signature, registered in our records under the name Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. He looked up. The scan results are documentary evidence of the highest grade recognized under Goblin law. Dumbledore was quiet. Additionally, Ragnarok continued, estate records identified the following. 1. That Mr. Potter's legal guardianship was assigned contrary to his father's registered will, which designated Sirius Orion Black as primary guardian. 2. That Mr. Potter's estate account has been accessed for a period of 7 years under an authorization that our analysts have assessed as inconsistent with the signing history of the purported signatory, his mother. 3. That Mr. Potter has spent 9 years in conditions of material deprivation, including documented malnutrition, an untreated bone fracture, and the suppression of his account status and personal history. He closed the first stack. As of 4:47 this morning, a lien has been placed on your registered portfolio under Clause 14 of the Goblin Sovereignty Act. All assets under Goblin hold pending resolution. He paused. You may respond. Dumbledore looked at Harry for a long moment. Harry looked back, steady, without blinking. I would like to begin, Dumbledore said, by saying that I understand how this looks. I understand, Director, that the documentary evidence, read in isolation, presents a picture that is deeply troubling. I would never attempt to minimize what the scan found or to suggest that your institutional obligations are anything other than what they are. He placed his hands flat on the table. But I must speak to the why of it, because without the why, the what is not merely incomplete, it is misleading. Speak to the why, Ragnarok said. In the autumn of 1981, our world came to the edge of extinction, Dumbledore said. His voice did not rise, it did not need to, it had a density that rose on its own. Voldemort, several people at the table shifted at the name, but Dumbledore did not stop, had spent over a decade systematically dismantling every protection we had. When he came to Godric's Hollow that night, when he killed James and Lily Potter, I was faced with a choice that I could not make slowly. The soul fragment that rebounded into the boy, the single fragment generated by the killing curse's rebound, was destroying him from within. It was not the clean rebounding that legend describes. It was ragged, it was tearing, and it was killing a 1-year-old child in real time. He paused. I intervened, he said. I took the soul fragment and I did what I could to stabilize it, to anchor it in a way that would prevent it from completing its damage. The anchoring process I used was the construct that I used, I will not pretend otherwise, carries the technical definition of a Horcrux anchor. But the intent was the opposite of Horcrux creation. I was not preserving a piece of my soul. I was containing a piece of someone else's, preventing it from doing further harm, Harry said. 1. Dumbledore looked at him. You just described putting in 1, Harry said. The scan found 47. The room was very quiet. Dumbledore's hands, flat on the table, did not move. His expression moved through something that Harry could not name and landed in a place of profound, carried sorrow. The single anchor was not sufficient, he said. The fragment was, it resisted containment. It was a piece of a profoundly damaged, profoundly dark soul, and it was active even in its diminished state. Over the subsequent years, I found it necessary to create additional structures to prevent the fragment from destabilizing the original anchor, and those structures required their own supporting constructs. And 47, Harry said again. Dumbledore looked at him. The sorrow in his face was real. Harry thought it was there. It was genuine in the way that all of Dumbledore's feelings were probably genuine. That was not the problem. The problem was the thing underneath the sorrow that the sorrow was being used to cover, which was the certainty, the absolute bedrock certainty, that the ends were clear and the means were secondary, and the boy sitting across the table had, at some point, stopped being a boy and become an engineering problem. I should have told you, Dumbledore said. I should have found a way, Mr. Dumbledore, Ragnarok said. Dumbledore looked at him. You have explained the genesis of the initial anchor and the subsequent 46 supporting constructs. I have listened and the crystal has recorded. Ragnarok opened the second document stack. I would now like to address several components of this account in the order they become relevant. He picked up the first document from the second stack and placed it in front of himself, aligned it, and did not consult it. You described the initial anchor as stabilizing a rebounded soul fragment that was destroying the child in real time, he said. Our analysts reviewed the scan results for evidence consistent with this account. Specifically, they looked for evidence that any of the 47 anchor structures are externally facing, that is, oriented toward containing or suppressing a foreign element rather than simply existing within the host tissue. He paused. They found none. All 47 anchors are constructed in the standard Horcrux configuration, which is designed to preserve and protect the anchored fragment from the external environment, not to suppress it from the host. Dumbledore said nothing. They are protective of the fragment, Ragnarok said, not protective of the child. The distinction is, Dumbledore began. Furthermore, Ragnarok said, as though Dumbledore had not spoken, the scan identified the soul material present within 3 of the anchors, those in the temporal lobe which had the highest structural density and provided the clearest readings. The material is identified as belonging to a single soul, partially degraded, of extreme dark magical saturation. It is not the soul of Lily or James Potter. It is not an unidentified wild fragment. It is the soul of a living individual. He looked up. An individual who was alive as of yesterday afternoon when the scan was completed. The room was quiet again, a different quality of quiet. Tom Riddle, Harry said. Everyone looked at him. Voldemort, Harry said. His real name is Tom Riddle. He's not dead. He looked at Ragnarok. Is he? Ragnarok looked at him for one long moment. The soul material identified in the scan is consistent with a living host experiencing severe bodily disruption but continued existence, he said carefully. We cannot confirm the identity from the scan alone, but it's consistent. Yes, Harry looked at Dumbledore. You knew he wasn't dead, he said, and you put pieces of his soul inside me. To keep them alive, he thought through the shape of it, the shape he had started building in the ward room yesterday and which was now almost complete. Because if he came back and he would come back, he needed something to reconstitute from, something preserved. And you had me? Dumbledore's expression had become very still. The sorrow was still there. Underneath it, now visible, was the iron calculator that the sorrow usually covered. Harry, he said. What I did because the alternative, you were going to let him come back, Harry said, through me. And then kill both of us. The calculator in Dumbledore's eyes did not flinch, that was the thing. It did not flinch. The greater good, Dumbledore said, requires sometimes that we make choices that would be unconscionable in any smaller context, Mr. Dumbledore, Ragnarok said. A generation of children would live free from terror, would never know the darkness that has defined the last decades, Mr. Dumbledore. And yes, the cost of that is terrible, is something I carry every day, but the weight of all those saved lives, Mr. Dumbledore, Ragnarok said, and the third instance of it had a quality that was not louder but was more absolute, the quality of a door closing. I am going to read from the case document now. Dumbledore stopped. Ragnarok lifted the document he had aligned precisely in front of himself and began to read. He read for 8 minutes. The document was the full accounting of the case. The scan results, the analyst reports on anchor configuration and soul material identification, the estate record discrepancies, the will override, the forged authorization, the 7 years of unauthorized account access, the 2 subsequent installation visits with their dates and the evidence supporting those dates, the cumulative resonance projections, and the neurological deterioration timeline. All of it read aloud in Ragnarok's even, precise, uninflected voice into the recording crystal, into the case record, without editorial comment and without pause. When he finished, he set the document down. The case documentation establishes 47 counts of unlicensed modification of a protected account holder, he said. 1 count of will interference, 1 count of unauthorized estate access via forged documentation, 1 count of unlawful placement of a minor contrary to registered estate instructions. The charge under Clause 14 stands, the lien on your portfolio stands. He folded his hands. The greater good is not a recognized defense under Goblin law, or under British wizarding law, or under any legal framework I am aware of. Dumbledore looked at the crystal, then at Ragnarok, then at Harry. Harry, he said, his voice had changed slightly. Still warm, still low, but with a new current in it that ran underneath the warmth, pressurized. What has been done to you is not something I can undo with words, I know that. I ask only that you consider you have been protected, my boy, kept safe precisely so that. From what, Harry said. Dumbledore paused. I lived in a cupboard, Harry said. I went into London last week with no money. I sold a brass button because it was the only thing I could find to sell. I don't have the word for what you thought you were protecting me from, but it must be something much worse than a cupboard, or the calculation doesn't work. The warmth in Dumbledore's voice had gone very still, the world that Voldemort would have created. Would have been worse than a cupboard, Harry said. I believe you, but I wasn't living in the world Voldemort would have created. I was living in the cupboard you put me in, and you had 47 anchors in me to make sure I stayed useful. He put his hands flat on the table. I don't think that's love, Professor. I think that's inventory management. The word inventory landed in the room and stayed there. Ragnarok looked at Harry with an expression that was not warm, not soft, not human in any conventional sense of the word, but it was the expression of one entity recognizing another entity across a considerable distance and finding the recognition precise. At 2:47, Alistair Moody came through the door. Harry had not known to expect Moody. He suspected from Ragnarok's lack of surprise that Ragnarok had known. Moody was broad, scarred in ways that suggested a long and varied professional history with violence, and he had one blue eye that moved independently of the other with the specific, unsettling rotation of something mechanical. He clumped into the room on a wooden leg, looked at everyone in it in rapid sequence, and settled his gaze on Harry with the blue eye and on Dumbledore with the other. The order is outside, he said to Dumbledore. 4 of them, the bank won't let them in. The Order of the Phoenix does not have a treaty with the Goblin Nation, Ragnarok said. They are consequently subject to our entry protocols in the same manner as any individual without established institutional standing. They may wait. Moody looked at Ragnarok, and the boy, Mr. Potter, is a ward of this institution and is present at this proceeding in that capacity. He is not available to the Order of the Phoenix, which has no legal standing in relation to his guardianship, his estate, or any matter pertaining to his account. Moody's blue eye rotated toward Harry. You all right, boy? Yes, Harry said. You know what you're doing. I read the ward form, Harry said. All of it. Moody looked at him for a moment with the blue eye and then made a sound that was not quite a laugh. He looked at Dumbledore. Albus. Dumbledore had not moved. He was looking at the table surface, not in defeat, in the way a strategist looks at a board after a piece has moved unexpectedly, recalculating. The presence of the Order of the Phoenix at this institution, Ragnarok said, combined with the nature of this proceeding, constitutes an implicit intimidation of an institutional proceeding under Clause 17. It is a separate offense from those already enumerated. It is being added to the case record. He nodded to the goblin with the crystal, who made an adjustment. The presence of each named Order member generates an individual violation. Their names, Moody said. You're not serious. The crystal is recording, Ragnarok said. Their names. There was a pause during which Moody appeared to be conducting an internal consultation with himself. Minerva McGonagall, Elphias Doge, Hestia Jones, Kingsley Shacklebolt, he said, and his voice had the quality of a man who has decided that cooperating is at least more controllable than the alternative. Griffook wrote. The crystal rotated. Thank you, Ragnarok said. He looked at Dumbledore. You will note that each member of the Order outside this building adds a numerical charge to the account. If additional members arrive, the count increases. We will be contacting each named individual with documentation of the violation within the hour. Dumbledore looked up from the table. Kingsley and the others are here because they care about Harry's welfare, he said. They came out of concern for a child. They came, said Ragnarok, because you told them to. At some point between 11 last night and 2 this afternoon, you assembled 4 colleagues outside the primary institution with which you are currently in a criminal proceeding, as this proceeding was beginning. That is the record. The intent the record reflects is apparent. Dumbledore was quiet. Moody said, I'll tell them to go. He was looking at Dumbledore. Dumbledore said nothing. Moody looked at him for one more moment, and something passed across Moody's face that was not quite disappointment and not quite recognition, but occupied the space between the two. Then he clumped back out the door. The room was quiet. Mr. Dumbledore, Ragnarok said, we will now discuss remediation. The remediation terms took 40 minutes to lay out and required Ragnarok to call in the goblin with the formal chain across his coat, whose name was Broadex and who was, apparently, Gringotts' head of financial adjudication. Broadex spread 3 documents across the table and read from each in turn, in a gobbledygook-inflected English that was even more precise than Ragnarok's, if that was possible. The portfolio lien, total. The portfolio was larger than Harry had been able to imagine when Ragnarok had said considerable. Dumbledore had been accumulating assets at Gringotts for 115 years, with the financial instincts of someone who was also strategically very clever about money, and had never made an uninformed investment in his long life. The total was a number that required several words to read aloud. The remediation cost, calculated from the extraction schedule, 26 days of specialized goblin healing practitioners, the instruments required, the post-procedural monitoring, the preparation phase. This was also large but was the smallest of the three numbers. The violation premium under Clause 14, this was where Broadex spent most of his time. Calculation factored in the number of unauthorized constructs, the duration of the offense, the number of separate installation events, the degree of premeditation as evidenced by the anatomical precision of the distribution, the degree of harm caused, the vision impairment, the cumulative resonance damage, the neurological deterioration timeline, and the vulnerability of the victim as a minor account holder with no access to institutional support. The premium multiplier was, Broadex said in his precise gobbledygook-inflected English, the highest he had applied in his 38 years of adjudication. When he announced the final number, the room was very still. Dumbledore looked at it. He had been very controlled throughout the 40 minutes, listening, occasionally making notes on a small piece of parchment, his face carrying the expression of a man who is doing structural mathematics behind an expression of calm. Now, looking at the final number, the mathematics showed briefly at the surface before disappearing again. That, he said, is the entirety of my registered portfolio. Yes, said Broadex, you are taking everything. The calculation results in a reclamation of the total portfolio, Broadex said, plus a balance of, he named a second number that was not small, which will be assessed against additional assets not currently held at Gringotts. We will be contacting the relevant institutions. Dumbledore looked at Ragnarok. The reclamation of my complete financial position will have consequences for Hogwarts, for the Order, for the work of rebuilding. The reclamation applies to your personal portfolio, Ragnarok said. Hogwarts School operates under a separate institutional charter. Its endowment is not registered to your personal account. Your personal funds, your personal holdings, your personal intellectual properties, those are the subject of the lien. There are individuals who depend on my resources, Dumbledore said. Individuals whose safety, whose work, they will need to find other support, Ragnarok said. Dumbledore looked at Harry. Harry looked back. I would like to speak with Harry alone, Dumbledore said. No, said Ragnarok, just for a few minutes without the formal record. I would like to speak to him as myself, not as a party to a proceeding, Mr. Potter is a ward of this institution, Ragnarok said. He does not have private meetings with individuals who are currently defendants in an active case pertaining to his own account. This is not a judgment about your intentions. It is the procedure. Dumbledore's hands, still flat on the table, pressed down slightly, then released. Harry, he said, and the warmth in his voice was very deliberate now, a chosen instrument. I have made mistakes, profound ones. I will not insult your intelligence by asking you to disbelieve what the scan found or to dismiss the framework these very thorough individuals have constructed. But I want you to know that every decision I made with your life in mind, your whole life, and the lives of everyone in our world. He paused. When this is over, when the proceedings are done and the terms are settled, there will still be a world to return to. I hope you will find it in yourself. I'm staying here until the extraction is done, Harry said. 26 days, and after, Harry thought about it. Ragnarok said the will name Sirius Black as my guardian. Where is he? A pause in which Dumbledore's expression moved through three distinct positions. Sirius is, there were complications. He is currently in Azkaban. Griffook went completely still beside Harry. For what? Harry said. He was convicted of the murders of 12 Muggles and the betrayal of your parents to Voldemort, Dumbledore said. Harry looked at Ragnarok. Can we check that? We can request the trial documentation from the Ministry, Ragnarok said. His voice had the quality of someone who has already decided what that documentation will say. He wasn't tried, Griffook said from very still. Was he? Dumbledore said nothing. He was not tried, Griffook said again. It was not a question. The stillness in him had the texture of something controlled very carefully from the inside. He was held, without a hearing, without Wisengamot review, without documentation of evidence. The circumstances were extraordinary, Dumbledore said. Ministry in 1981 was, under Goblin law, Ragnarok said, and something in his voice had shifted by one precise degree, not louder, not hotter, but denser, packed tighter. The wrongful imprisonment of the designated guardian of a registered minor account holder, when that imprisonment results in the minor being placed contrary to their parents' documented wishes, constitutes a separate act of interference with an estate. He looked at Dumbledore. Was the Ministry's decision to imprison Sirius Black without trial made with your knowledge, Mr. Dumbledore? The room waited. I was aware, Dumbledore said, that Sirius had been taken into custody. And you raised no objection to his detention without trial. The Ministry, did you raise an objection? Ragnarok said, yes or no. The crystal rotated. No, said Dumbledore. Griffook wrote something in his ledger. His pen moved with the specific force of someone writing something that cannot be taken back. At 4:30, Dumbledore left. He rose from his chair with the contained, deliberate movement of a man who intends to leave a room without appearing to have been removed from it. He gathered his parchment notes. He picked up his wand. He looked at Harry one final time. "The world is not simple," he said. "I hope in time you will understand that the choices available to me were not the choices I would have wished for." Harry said, "I know the world isn't simple." Dumbledore waited as though there were more. "But it only needs to be simple about some things," Harry said, "whether or not someone put 47 pieces of someone else's soul into a child. That one doesn't need to be complicated." Dumbledore looked at him. The blue eyes were very old and very certain, and they were not unkind, and they did not even now think they had been wrongs, not fundamentally, not at the core of it. They thought they had been forced into a narrow corridor by the size of the forces at work in the world, and that everything they had done from inside that corridor. Harry could see all of this. He did not move his hands. Dumbledore left. The door closed. Ragnock set down his pen. It was the first time Harry had seen him do it without immediately picking it back up. "The additional charges," Griffook said, "the Black Guardianship interference." "Document it," Ragnock said. "We will request the Ministry imprisonment records by the end of the day. If he was held without trial, we file a separate action on behalf of the estate." "He could be released," Harry said. Ragnock looked at him. "If we prove he wasn't tried properly, he could be released." Harry was thinking through the shape of this new piece, placing it against the others. "He's named in the will. If he's released and cleared, he's my legal guardian. That process," Ragnock said carefully, "involves the Ministry. It is not within our direct jurisdiction, but you can file documents. You can make noise. We can file considerable documents," Ragnock said. "We can make considerable noise." "Then do that," Harry said. Ragnock looked at him for a long moment, then he nodded once and picked up his pen. Broadex began gathering his documents. The recording goblin settled the crystal into its case. The room that had held its held breath quality all afternoon began to exhale into something that was not resolution, but was the shape that preceded it. Harry sat in his chair and did not move. "Mr. Potter," Ragnock said, without looking up from what he was writing, "you asked him the right questions." Harry looked at the surface of the table. The table that was stone, just stone, no decorative anything, because Gringotts did not ornament what it did not need to ornament. "I've been asking questions like that for a long time," he said. "No one ever answered them before." Ragnock said nothing. The pen moved. The wardroom at 7 o'clock, dinner on the desk brought while Harry was washing at the basin. Bread, a bowl of soup that was still warm, a piece of hard cheese. On the chair, Griffook with a document reading. Harry sat on the bed. He ate the bread first because bread kept you longer. He thought about the soup, let it sit, ate the cheese first, then the soup. The lamp was in the wall above the desk, giving the same flat, steady light it had given this morning and would give tomorrow morning and every morning after that until the stone absorbed it entirely, which it had been not quite managing for several hundred years. "Griffook," Harry said. "Yes." "The extraction starts in 3 days. The preparation phase starts in 3 days, Griffook said, without looking up from his document. "The first extraction procedure is on the 4th day, and after 26 days. Your account is returned to its unmodified baseline," Griffook said. "The ward status continues until Gringotts has confirmed that baseline and documented it. And the case, Dumbledore's portfolio, runs parallel. The financial adjudication is separate from your physical remediation. Both proceed simultaneously." Harry finished the soup. The bowl was stone like everything else, and he put it on the tray and looked at the lamp. "And Sirius Black." Griffook turned a page. "The Ministry records request went out at 5:17. We expect response within 48 hours. A pause. If the records confirm what we believe they will confirm, the petition for review goes to the Wisengamot. Our legal department has handled 3 cases of wrongful imprisonment through Wisengamot petition in the past century. We have a favorable record." "How favorable?" 3 for 3, Griffook said. Harry looked at the brass button on the desk. "Crown up always." He did not know why he kept putting it crown up. Some preference he had formed before he knew he'd formed it. He lay down on the bed. The blankets were wool. The ceiling was stone. The lamp was the same as it always was. "Griffook," he said. "Yes, you're still here." A pause. "The document requires reviewing. You could review it somewhere else." Griffook said nothing. He turned another page. Harry looked at the ceiling. The stone had irregularities. He'd counted them last night. He did not count them again. He already knew the number, and knowing the number was enough. It was a thing about numbers. You only needed to count once if you did it properly. He thought about the extraction schedule, the 26 days, the procedures in their documented sequence. He thought about the case file growing in Ragnarok's office upstairs, acquiring new pages, documented in the precise notationless language of institutional record. He thought about Sirius Black in a cell, 12 years of it, waiting for something that had not come yet, but that was now, for the first time, moving toward him. The lamp burned steadily. Griffux's pen made a small sound, reviewing something, marking it. The building was around them, deep, settled, cold at its core, older than the government it operated under, indifferent to politics in the specific way of things that have outlasted everyone who ever tried to use politics against them. Harry put the brass button on the blanket next to his hand. It was not warm. It was exactly as warm as the room, which was the temperature of stone after centuries, which was not warm at all, and which was, for the first time in his memory, exactly the right temperature. He closed his eyes. Down the corridor, up through the stone, across the main hall into the offices, Ragnarok wrote. The case file was 41 pages now. By morning, it would be longer. The iron stamp was on the desk to his right. He would use it before morning, several times, for the letters going to additional ministry departments, to the Wisengamot Record Office, to the International Goblin Conclave Secretariat, updating the preliminary notice with a first-day summary of the proceedings. He wrote without stopping. The institution worked around him, the night tellers, the vault carts far below, the couriers moving between floors with sealed documents, the analysts reviewing scan records and portfolio inventories and trial documentation that the ministry would shortly be required to produce. The machinery of it moved the way old machinery moves, without announcing itself, without requiring acknowledgement, without sentiment of any kind attached to the product. What it produced was a record. What the record said was, this happened, this was the damage, this is the accounting, this is what it costs. It did not say anything else. It did not need to. The pen moved. The iron stamp waited. The stone held.